So I wanted to talk about the Brockhampton album Iridescence. It's their first record for a major label, and their first record since kicking out founding member Amir Van. A lineup change that has had a pronounced effect on this record, because there are a lot of trade-offs that go with Amir's removal from the band. On one hand, Brockhampton lose their deepest and most consistently aggressive voice. On the other hand, there is now more room for members like Joba and Bareface to have a place within Brockhampton's music. And of course, it's always nice to not have a sexist piece of shit as part of your creative team. And it's clear from the moody atmosphere and lyrics about uncertainty and apprehension from all the other members that Brockhampton have taken this loss hard. And as such, many of the slower, moodier tracks on this record are the ones that really shine. This is not an album that really banks on its bangers. That being said, Iridescence opens up hard with the cut New Orleans, which has killer fucking verses from all of the vocalists of Brockhampton, over top of one of the few relatively static beats on this record. And if that doesn't sound like a grab for mainstream attention, then there's also the Jaden Smith feature that graces this cut with Jaden just repeating the chorus instead of Kevin Abstract. And it goes over okay, I guess. There's not much to really fuck up with that feature, and honestly, like, the change up in vocalists invigorates the chorus just a little bit, because truth be told, it's kind of a weak-ass chorus. The strength of this opener is clearly defined by the verses, with Dom going hard right off the bat, and Merlin really, bringing the energy right at the end of the track. It's solid as fuck for what it is, and slides seamlessly into the second track, Thug Life, which is a much more subdued, melodic number, but unfortunately most of the first half of this record goes back and forth like this, with one punchy number immediately followed by something weightier and melodic. Berlin brings some interesting production choices that sound like revving car engines, but something about him is not only the shortest song on the record, but also possibly the weakest melodic moment. Brockhampton have always embraced bad autotune, but this track also boasts really lamely generic lyrics, and this sort of one-twoing really doesn't allow the record to build up much momentum. It's not really until Wait that we start getting the evolving song structures that we were seeing on Saturation 3. The song starts off with Kevin Abstract delivering lines about his insecurities and coming into his sexuality over top some pretty melodramatic strings, before descending into this absolutely awesome breakbeat. But there's a lyric in Kevin's verse that I keep focusing on as I'm listening to this record, where he's questioning his place in the boy band, feeling like he is the most inadequate player within the group. And I feel bad because, at least on Iridescence, I feel like there's a glint of truth in that statement. I don't think he has as interesting of a voice as the rest of the band, and has really leveraged his ear for melodic hooks and his sexuality as a topic to bring interest to him as a member within the group. But that being said, on this record as a whole, there are not a lot of really strong hooks. And on Wait in particular, I feel like Dom and Joba do such a better job of using their vocals to really mold the mood of their heavy lyrics. And I know that Kevin can be an absolutely pivotal player in Brockhampton. There's a reason that he is the sort of leader and face of the band in many ways. In the lead up to Iridescence's release, there were several singles the band dropped that didn't end up making it onto the record, several of which featured really awesome hooks by Kevin that really boosted their listenability compared to some of the more meandering songs here on Iridescence. Because as much as I love the more meandering song structures that are gonna flesh out the later half of Iridescence, there's something about their summer singles that was really memorable because of the choruses. 1999 Wildfire in particular has this like very outcast-ish melodic hook from Kevin that is just so memorable. And any sort of memorable hook would have definitely elevated a lot of the tracks on Iridescence. I wish District or Jauvert had something to really tie them together, because the verses on them are all so interesting and good, but there's not something punchy and like earwormy to really bring you back to them. And as such, a lot of the songs on here are less fun and less memey than the material that was on Saturation. There's less quotables, there's not ridiculous choruses, and the instrumentals are much more subdued. And I think that all stems from the general mood the band were going into with recording this record. They're young men faced with sudden and overwhelming fame, as well as betrayal. It's hard not to hear the interlude Loophole and not feel like the band are really jaded about the industry and circumstances that they're into. And all of these criticisms that I'm lobbying here don't really amount to bad material, so much as I think they keep the material from being as memorable and exciting as it could be. Because Brockhampton can really lean into their strength by numbers approach to making music. With a whole slew of producers and vocalists at their disposal, they can really keep ideas fresh even if the energy or compositional elements aren't quite there. And since the band have allegedly signed a record contract that's going to see them pumping out something like 6 records in the next handful of years, I think that the mediocrity of some of the material here is going to be largely forgotten soon in the face of other records. Who knows? On the next release, the band could be largely over this patch of moodiness. Now, lastly, I want to talk about the final 3 songs on the record: San Marcos, Tanya, and Fabric. These are the 3 longest songs on the record, and in my mind, 3 of the strongest songs on the record. First off, San Marcos, which has the most gorgeous chorus on the whole record. It's really a song where Bareface's contributions to the band are felt most actively. There's lots of acoustic guitars, lots of melody, and sees the band really utilizing the increased production budget that they had for this record. And also, unlike many of the Bareface-heavy songs from previous Brockhampton projects, this one starts off a cappella with Matt Champion's voice under heavy manipulation, rapping about his dejected attitude and how he covers that up through various forms of debauchery. Until the rest of the production comes in, this is very stark and strange, but then eventually morphs into one of the most accessible cuts on the record, and it just feels like this song hasn't played all of its cards. And right at the end, when the choir comes in to sing the ending refrain, I was caught off guard. It's not something that the band had done before, and they managed to pull it off seamlessly. And then there's Tanya. This was a song that they had teased prior to even the summer singles coming out. It was done as a one-off performance on one of those late-night talk shows, and it was just so out there for compared to what the band normally do, that I was really curious to hear a studio version of it, wondering if like they had to change and strip down a lot of it for that particular performance. But no, this is possibly the most austere song that they've ever released. It starts off with these very refined sounding pianos, just alone in the mix, and from there Bareface just takes over the song. His usual auto-tune bliss actually packs a lot of power and range on this particular song, but instead of it just being a Bareface solo track, he turns things over to the rest of the band, who all deliver some of the most vulnerable material any of them have been on. And the song picks up into an actual, like, complex beat after a while, and not just the stark piano number that it started as. In particular, Dom sounds absolutely heartbroken on his verse, and who knew that Merlin could handle something so low-key and be so impactful still while doing it, delivering these really hard-hitting lines about his parents still not being supportive of his career and the continued prejudice that he is on the receiving end of. And I kind of wish that the record had ended with Tanya, since it is such a well-executed and poignant moment. But then we have Fabric, which kind of has a weak first half to it as a song before building up into this absolutely claustrophobic monster of a closing number. There's something ominous about how the end half of the song starts layering on all these discordant elements that just churn before dropping off to just these abrasive drum blasts and the chanted vocals. Now, it's not a perfect song, but it really does seem to have been intentionally molded for the purpose of being the closer. And again, it's very different from the ending of the Saturation albums, which all featured a big number from Bareface. And I appreciate that Brockhampton are paying attention to album structure and really crafting art with that in mind, especially in this age of streaming where most people don't really listen to albums or albums in order or really care about those sort of designations. So how do I feel about Iridescence? Well, I think it is a strong record, but not a fully realized record. I've been enjoying it immensely, but it feels like the potential is not quite there yet, but it does sound like a Brockhampton record, and it sounds distinctly different from Saturation while still being inescapably them. This could be their sophomore slump if you want to count all the Saturation records as their first album. I know American Trash is out there, but... So yeah, it feels like a sophomore slump. There is greatness here to be had, but again, there's something that feels like it's holding it back, and I just hope that we don't have to wait that long for the follow-up, because right now, the hype is hot. This is a fucking decent-ass fucking album. They put out some hot singles on the side this summer. They're coming fresh off of that Saturation trilogy from last year. Like, the future is fucking looking good for these guys, despite how they might be feeling personally right now. And, I wish them all the best.